Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod to talk about MSU's victory over the Florida Atlantic Owls, 86-69 at the Breslin Center this afternoon. It was a game where MSU just seemed a little sleepy to me, which is probably a little characteristic of games around this time of the year, especially for all these players who, frankly, don't hail from very close to East Lansing. I think only one's from nearby in Jackson. The game was tight throughout for the first, I don't know, 14 minutes or so, maybe. And then the Spartans started a little bit of a working margin, pulled away out to a 42-29 lead at halftime, and really played with that comfortable margin throughout the second half and cruise in with a solid, yet I think fairly uninspiring victory by 17. They got, I think, up to as far as 20 points. There were flashes of some really good fast breaks and some pretty good play. And then other times they were kind of, again, like I think just sort of uninspired, sort of sleepy. But overall, I thought the game was probably marked, I think probably the best game was certainly Cohen Carr, certainly the loudest. He had led the way with 17 points. Hit 7-9 from the field. I think 5 of those were dunks. He had a layup and then hit his one 3-point attempt, which came after on the end of a really pretty spectacular block that a lot of these guys block, 27, rows into the stands. He hit it back onto the floor where Jeremy Fears could grab it, went race down the floor, and then was able to hit the three, which you almost felt like for sure he was going to make that just because after sort of that confident with I think he had a dunk prior to that too, but he had a lot of really impressive plays in the break, and you're starting to see what he can do. Also was 2 for 2 from line, had a steal as well. So a good game by him. Booker was a little bit, I think, regressed a little bit. So, we'd always talk about that hockey stick. I think this was one of those games where he didn't perform great. Kohler, and the other one I'd say with Kohler was certainly very good dominant on the boards, and which he's been consistently, and just couldn't make short shots. And I think Izzo after the game was joking that maybe he's doing that just to boost his rebound numbers. So he finished with 4 points. He's like 2 for 10 shooting or something like that.
2 for 9.
2 for 9. Yeah. Jeremy Fears is really good. Jace Richardson was very good. I think what Fears was like 8 assists to 1 turnover, and defensively, and I would say overall, although I thought they were not great, especially the end of the game, they sort of got a little lazy on defense, but they were really good in shutting down a team that was really good from outside the arc, and they pretty much put the clamps on for virtually the entire game.
Yeah. I don't know if I would characterize it as sleepy, because that to me
86
implies,
points sleepy.
well, but even besides that, like normally you see that, say, okay, they're letting some stuff go defensively. They're making uncharacteristic turnovers, that type of thing. And it wasn't that. It was, I would agree that there just didn't seem to be hugely energetic play until Michigan State had a run where Cohen Carr in transition, and it should never surprise us with him when it happens, but it more than any other player I think I've ever seen, certainly at Michigan State, he has not just dunks, but emphatic dunks.
Yeah.
Kind of out of nowhere, which is it's testament to how exceptional an athlete he is. Because for anybody else, you wouldn't see it. The first one of those I'm talking about was one where he got the ball in transition and was heading toward the rim, but not out ahead of the defense, and in a position where you would expect somebody else to probably end up taking something of a runner. And instead, he just kind of exploded for a 2-hand dunk. They got everybody going. So there was that. Then I believe it was the next possession, nice post feed to Zapala, who flushed it hard. And then not too long after that was the one that really, I don't know how it was taken at Breslin, but I can tell you that the announcing team, and generally everybody I think who's seen it, because it's all over social media, another one in transition where Cohen cocked it back behind his head. That took the roof off. And I think it was those 3 plays, honestly, that kind of kicked that game into another gear. Sometimes you can overplay that stuff, but honestly, dunks are energy plays, and there are times where
especially at home. Yeah.
there are times where it's worth more than 2 points.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And they had 3 of them in fairly short succession that I think really turned the game from kind of a tight back and forth kind of affair to MSU having a substantial lead and just being able to give FAU the Heisman, which is really how it felt through, I'd say, the entirety of the second half. I don't
Yeah.
think FAU ever got it to single digits.
No, it
If
was like 10, 11 maybe.
if they
Yeah.
did, it would have been for like one possession.
Right.
But MSU was, every time FAU would make a little bit of a run to kind of get it bordering on that point, MSU would do something to hold them off and keep that lead firmly in double digit category. It's funny because I said this on the Spartan Mag board. It was a weird game to me because, and this kind of maybe gets in a general sense to your sleepy comment. It maybe says something about the standard that I think this team is capable of being held to, that you look at a game like this against a good opponent. I'm not going to build FAU up into something they're not, but this is a solid team. They're inside the top 100. So you would equate them to a lower echelon Big Ten team, I think is fair, a fair ballpark to put them in. And you win by 17. They're never within single digits in the entire second half. You do a pretty good job on the boards. You run, you get to the line and convert those. You do a lot of things well. Defensively, you shut down a very good offensive team. Remember, as we talked about in the preview, this is a good offensive team, and MSU locked them up for a large portion of that game. I think you correctly said late. It got kind of a little loose there in the last 5-6 minutes, but you do all those things, and yet you come away from it from an MSU perspective. And I have not seen Izzo's post game. It sounds like you listened to it. I would guess that he was kind of in a kind of feeling as well, because there were things they didn't do particularly well. They really struggled finishing twos. This is the second straight game, I believe, where they were under 50% from twos. And that is not what this team has done, particularly exactly around the rim, although not solely that. I felt it was two things. I think it was some of that where they just were not finishing baskets around the rim that were there to be made, and then some shot selection stuff. Trey Holloman's shot selection is still really sticking with me as something that's got to improve, because he had at least one occasion where he just threw up a turnaround from like 15 feet. It's like, that's not a shot that should be taken,
Yeah.
And he wasn't the only one. I don't mean to just single him out, but I just felt like shot selection, finishing around the basket, not great by MSU in this game. And so there were things. We said that the defense was not spectacular. There were things that you didn't love, and then you look up and you're like, oh, but there's all these positives. They win by 17 against a good opponent. So I do think that says something about the standard that we're able to hold this team to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because this time last year, we would have been celebrating.
Yeah,
for real.
No question.
And
we've been excited. We've been thrilled with the rebounding. We would have been thrilled with We would have been like good, solid 3-point shooting. You got it from places you didn't expect today. You got, the 3 for 3 from Carr, Fears, and Normand. You wouldn't expect that, which is boosting them up to almost 40% from 3 after kind of really rough start.
That felt like about as false a number as you can get, but I'll take it. We'll come back to that. But
and this is one of those games. So Fears finishes with 13, and it was kind of I don't want to say quiet 13, but he's very.
I'm gonna disagree with that. I thought.
He had he had what 2 and 1s probably in that. He struggled a little bit from the line, but otherwise, he was good.
He was great today.
Yeah,
he was great. You look at those numbers that he put up. Yeah, the points are nice, but just the playmaking. He's so smart. He
Yep.
just the way he defends. I mean, all of it. Just his complete floor game. I know I'm a big Jeremy Fears booster, but um, he's getting better and better.
Yep.
And this was I thought, a really good game from him because, as we said in the preview, this team actually, Florida Atlantic, has two capable point guards, and Michigan State dominated that matchup.
Yeah.
Now, some
They
of
didn't
it
do
was
anything. Yeah.
some of it was foul trouble related on the part of their starter, but Michigan State forced some of that. But
Exactly.
I thought Jeremy was outstanding today. Really, really good stuff. And that's the thing. They got, we keep saying their depth is so important, and it is. And part of it is what you saw today, that you don't know where it's going to come from. So who has the big scoring games? Well, it's Jeremy Fears and it's Cohen Carr. There's guys that you don't necessarily expect to be at the top of the scoring list, but there they are. And they do it in a day where, well, Jackson Kohler wasn't at his best, and Xavier Booker wasn't at his best. Guys that have been very productive of late. Those, you have other guys step in and pick up that slack. You could complain about it, and I'm not seeing a ton of this in the fan base, but invariably you're going to hear Michigan State's going to have poor color guys on broadcasts eventually. I mean, it's going to happen. I've already got my finger on the pulse. Watch for a guy named Don McLean.
Don McLean doesn't sound like a real name.
Don McLean. Well, it's actually the name of a fairly famous singer from the early 70s. This is a different Don McLean. I bet you're familiar with the song American Pie. I'm sure most of our listeners are.
Of course.
That was Don McLean. This is a different Don McLean. This Don McLean played at UCLA in the late 80s and early 90s and was a very, very good player. But he is now on my radar where he never was before, because I didn't watch the Pac-12 network. But now he's the West Coast Big Ten network guy.
Oh, he gets sucked
in. And I'm
huh?
already hearing a lot of dummy talk. It's amazing to me from a guy who was a great player. A lot of stuff. I'm like, really? Did he just say that? Anyway, watch for him. But if I had to put my money down on the first guy on a broadcast going forward that you hear say something to the effect of, well, the problem for Michigan State is they don't have a go-to guy. I put my money on him. But anyway, where that's and I get it that in tight games, which you expect a lot of conference games will be, that is a question. You do like the feeling of knowing, hey, we've got a guy that when the going gets tough, we put the ball in his hands and he can make a play. Tyson Walker last year, as a Michigan State fan, I think you felt pretty confident in having that guy. And Michigan State does not have anybody who's emerged that way. The flip side to it is, as an opponent, I don't know.
Yeah, right.
I can't load up on one guy. I can't say, look, we're going to do everything we can to force the ball out of Tyson Walker's hands and let somebody else do it. That's not the deal with this team.
Yeah.
And what that means is you don't have that lack of confidence in what we've never asked. Everybody's kind of being asked to do it at certain points. Now, they haven't had a ton of tight games either, which is another issue. But I think I take it as a positive that this team has so many guys, pretty much anybody, I believe, and Cohen led them in scoring tonight, right? I got to go back. Before the Oakland game, Jack Ebling, when I was on his show, gave me a stat that said Michigan State had been led in scoring up to that point in a game by 6 different guys. And then Booker did it against Oakland. I think he would have been the 7th. I'm not sure if Carr is the 8th or not.
Well, he would be. He hasn't led it before this.
Okay, then
I'm almost certain he hasn't.
If that's true, it's either 7 or 8 now. You think about that. That's a very, very rare thing. To have that kind of, and it is true balance, So
before you go on, I would just say that the interesting thing about that too is, you can say, well, you don't have a go-to person, one you can rely on. And sometimes that is a real problem because you have a bunch of people who no one can score, right? Like, I mean, we've had that
Exactly.
before where we've had
Exactly.
like the year with Aaron Henry, it was kind of Aaron and he wasn't quite ready to embrace that. And so you kind of had a bunch of players, no one really wanted the ball. Whereas I think right now you got a bunch of people, and certainly on one day, given day, someone might be more comfortable than others, but you have a lot of different options on the floor of people who can go and get a bucket. And so it's almost it can be, you can look at it two different ways. And I think in this situation is actually probably a strength for the team than a weakness.
So, something else too worth talking about here, and I agree with all that you just said. Something else to keep in mind though. Part of this, I believe, is a function of the way Michigan State is functioning offensively, meaning they've got true creative players.
Yeah.
They've got a good passing team in general, but particularly at the point. And when you have that, sometimes what that means is, well, it's just going to be the guy that ends up with the right opportunity on a given night. And if
Yep.
you've got point guards that are capable of creating opportunities and finding people, then it can just be a night where it's, hey, it's Carson Cooper's night. It's Jackson Kohler's night. It's Simone Zapala's night. It's Frankie Fiddler's night. And the names that you wouldn't necessarily expect at the top of at the top of your list for guys to lead MSU in scoring, it can happen for different people just because, well, that's what the defense gave us. And our point guards found the guys that the defense gave us and they scored and we won.
Yeah.
It's a function of that too, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, right now, to your point, I mean, you've got obviously Fears and Richardson. People can create. I feel pretty comfortable with Akins for the most part. He's not
Yep.
making as many bad decisions. Frankie Fiddler really can get in there and do so, as can Holloman. Even Kohler, he's had a couple good passes tonight too. He had one to Zapala, which was fantastic. I think it was to
Yep.
Zapala. They've a lot of people who can create and cause problems, and of course Carr too. I mean, if you put him in the right situation, right place, he can get in and like that one dunk you mentioned. I remember him getting it. I'm like, I didn't know how he got to the rim. Like I thought there was no
Right.
way to even squeeze through. And not only did he squeeze
It's
through, but he
not.
just
It's not the first time
went
he's
for
done
through.
that this
No, I
year
know.
either. By the way,
I don't even think it's an angle, and it's
it
just suddenly
it
before you know it,
right.
he's flushing it through. You're like, how did that happen?
Speaking for myself, and it sounds like for you as well. It's just there are these moments maybe every other game where he ends up with a dunk that you do not see coming
No, yes, for sure.
because a normal player, and I'm talking about a normal guy who
99% of
dunks,
players, right? Yeah.
right? Not just a normal player, a normal guy who dunks would not dunk that because they wouldn't have the explosiveness. It's amazing, but
Yeah.
what he does. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think the thing that I feel coming out of this one is okay. Beat goes on, full speed ahead. You got some things to continue to work on. Again, 2 straight games under 500 for or under 50% from two. That's not going to cut it. That's not good enough. And so they got to get back on the beam in terms of finishing. Jackson really struggled today. Great
Yeah.
game. Great game on the boards. I thought a solid game defensively with the challenge he had
Yep.
with
I think so
guarding
too.
Baba Miller. But hey, got to finish those plays around the bucket. Didn't do a good enough job. And he wasn't the only one, but he's the one who took the most shots and he's the one you expect to finish those plays. And so that's something that the team, I think needs to have as an area of focus going into this break and then coming out of it, getting Western before they go back into Big Ten play.
Yeah.
But again, I feel pretty fortunate that that's what we're talking about. As that one thing is, well, they got to be a little better finishing twos. That's not a bad place to be.
No, and the only other thing mentioned about the game too, and especially the first half was really evident. I mean, I think there were 15 fouls on Florida Atlantic, maybe ended up being
Yeah,
pushed up a little bit more
a ton.
beyond that. And they were all forced by Michigan State. I mean, they weren't like there may be one or two cheapies, but for the most part,
There were
it was
some
because they were attacking.
There were some offensive fouls
Yeah, there were a couple,
that
and they were like pretty bad
yeah,
offensive
they
screens and stuff.
were. Yeah,
But it caused a lot of disruption for Florida Atlantic because it took out their was their back line, right? I mean, like they were
yeah.
real lot of foul trouble with both Miller and then Vocalitis. I can't remember his name. But I
Yep.
think that's Vocatitis. So they really put them out, took them out, which probably I think contributed a little bit to the 29 points they only had in the first half. So, so that was the double benefit, right? One, of course, is that you get the free throws, but the other thing is that you're causing a real problem from a depth standpoint for Florida Atlantic. I mean, I was joking with my son. I'm like, I don't know we didn't go into the walk-ons, for the pregame. They were starting to run out of players.
Right.
All right. Well, let's talk about the player to keep in the gutter, brought to you by the Brothers Just Gutters. That was Baba Miller. If you need gutter work and, make sure it's a very important part of your house, make sure, or your business, make sure you have that proper water disposal off your roof. You make sure you're good downspouts. The water flows away from the house. So sometimes you can have really great gutters. It comes down and then it just pools by your house. You want to make sure you have the nice downspouts and the nice outspouts, I think they call them, to get it away from the foundation. That's really important too. So the Brothers Just Gutters can come out and evaluate that, make sure it's all taken care of. If you have a leaky spot, if it's full of leaves, if it needs to get cleaned out, they can also take care of that as well. You can always make sure that they're going to be ones on the ladder and you're not, so you can stay safe. And they'll even get out in weather like this, as long as it's not like a middle of a blizzard or something. They'll be out there taking care of all this stuff. This is their slow time, so if you need some work done, this is an easy time to get it done. So I'd encourage you to contact them. As long as there's not like, a foot of snow on your roof, they can get out there and take care of things. You can contact them through our support page at thefinalfoursontheschedule.com/support. You can get a hold of Kurt on the west side of the state and Greg on the east side of the state. I think I had that backwards last game. So anyway, make sure you get a hold of them. 10% off. You mentioned Final Four when you get your estimate for the Brothers at Just Two Gutters. All right. So Bobby Miller was a player that you thought needed to keep in the gutter. He finished 5 of 10 from the field, 0 for 3 from 3, 2 for 2 from the line, 12 points, 7 rebounds, 2 of them offensive, had a couple of assists, no turnovers, no steals, a couple of blocks. So he pretty much, I thought, was relatively neutralized. I mean, partly was due to foul trouble. He had his third foul, I think, with like 5 or 6 minutes left in the first half. He was kind of came out a little bit with 2 fouls. They had to put him back in. Once things started going sideways on Florida Atlantic in the first half. And anyway, I think the Michigan State did a pretty good job of preventing him, certainly from hurting them from deep. And so he wasn't able to really do a whole lot there, which, he was shooting 40% and ended up shooting 0 for 3.
Yep. Yeah. I think MSU in general did a really good job with this team from the perimeter. It wasn't just happenstance that they shot so poorly. Michigan State really contested well, and he was one of those guys. The thing is, he had basically an average kind of game for himself.
Yep.
Slightly under his scoring average, but I think that counts because for Florida Atlantic to win this game, that's a good team, but they're not a great team. And you could see it in this game, at least to me. Where do they have the guys that you would say, all right, you could drop that guy onto a standard issue Big Ten roster tomorrow, and he's not going to look out of place. Baba Miller's the first guy, and then the other big kid,
Vokietis,
yeah. That's the other, where I really believe that those guys could start on a lot of Big Ten teams. And so if you're Florida Atlantic, if you're going to spray an upset, you probably need Baba Miller to have a great game. You need your best player to be really, really good. And he wasn't. Michigan State, he did some things, but Michigan State limited him. And I thought that was really important and a nice thing to see from a variety of guys, but primarily Kohler and Booker defensively had most of it. There were segments where Frankie Fiddler even played a little bit of 4, and Cohen Carr might have seen a turn or two, but by and large, it was those two guys. And I think they certainly didn't completely take Miller away, but they didn't let him do in this game the things I think he needed to do for Florida Atlantic to have a chance.
Yeah, he was gutter adjacant.
Yeah,
I think
there you go. Teetering on the edge.
Yeah, right. He was just by the downspout. The one player played really well for them was Trey Carroll. I mean, he finished 10 for 15, 24 points. It's a career high, I think, for him. 2 for 3 from 3. Had to put some free throws, 8 rebounds. He was kind of forced into action early because of the foul trouble, and so I think he probably got a little more minutes than usual. Now he still was averaging 10 points a game, so it's not like totally insane that he finished with 24. And in some respects, someone has to score for Florida Atlantic. He just happened to be the
Well,
guy who got it, and he got a bunch late too in the second half. I think if I've got
he
the
did. He
splits
did.
here.
He
Yeah, he
got.
got
He got.
17 of his 24 in the
Yeah,
second half. Yeah,
he did. He got loose in the second half, but he was still, 7 points in the first half wasn't bad.
yeah,
Um, he's had a good season, and if you remember from our preview, he's a holdover. He's a guy who was he was in their rotation, but very deep, like probably like a ninth, 10th man
hmm
last year. He decided to stay there, and they really benefited. He's been their best. They've got those two starters inside that I just talked about, and then he's the next guy
yeah,
off the bench, and he's been productive for them. I think today, the way you put it is true to some extent. Well, somebody's going to score, but I think he just happened to find himself in spaces oftentimes where Michigan
yep,
State's defense was pretty good, but they just weren't able to rotate back to him in time. And he hit him. But my memory of
hmm
his game is there were a lot of, 10-foot shots
yeah. Like
that he got.
one hand
Yes.
shots. Or he's like,
Push,
yeah,
push half jumpers
yeah,
that he hit. So credit to him. He made those shots. And he did other things too. I don't mean to demean his game. He played very well.
yeah,
But a lot of it was just right man, right place. Ball found him. Michigan State didn't quite get back to him after cutting somebody else off, and then he hits an open shot. But he was definitely the guy who kept it from being a blowout for sure,
yeah.
because they weren't getting point production, from the guys that they expect to. I mean, Caleb Glenn came in as their leading scorer. He had 6 points, 2 for 9
Yeah.
from the floor. So and again, Miller was kind of average, and they didn't really get it from the places they would expect to. So it was important for them that he stepped up just to keep this a semi-competitive game.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of his scoring, at least a decent percentage, was like a 10-foot jumpers, which if you can't take away everything on defense. And so they're definitely
Correct.
taking away the 3-point shot. They're doing a really good job rotating around. There were very few. There's like one in the corner I think they gave up that sort of scrambling a little bit, and they gave up a wide open three. But there weren't many of them, which is testament to the fact that Florida Atlantic hit 4 for the entire game, despite trying to 22 or something like that.
Yep.
And you're not, and they weren't giving up a whole lot of twos, except later in the second half, when we set the guy kind of loose. But so they were just, those are tougher shots. And so if you got to give up something, that's probably what you want to give up a longer two. And
Yeah,
just.
it is like the shot. Not all, but a number of the shots he hit. Okay, I
Yeah.
mean, the unfortunately, you can't take away everything all the time. But he was the guy who was the beneficiary of that. But the guy they had the focus on, Baba Miller, really didn't get loose.
Yeah. Well, it's just like we've played Purdue in the past. We're gonna take away the 3, give you all the 2s you want, and
Yep.
because again, you can't take away everything. So if you
Right.
score 86 points, it's gonna be hard for someone to win just hitting
Right.
2s on you. So,
Right.
all right. So then we'll go to our next segment, which is Who Cleans the Glass Best, brought to you by the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. If you need someone to clean your glass at your home, there's no better place than the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. They also cover the Kalamazoo area a little bit too. I'm going to talk to them and kind of figure out how large their region is, but it's really, really great work. They clean. Now they can also power wash your house, and they get up close. They're not like blasting away from 30 feet away. They get up a nice gentle clean, which is not like all the people you might hire to power wash your house. And so if you want them to get out there, they can do it now. Even this kind of weather, although people aren't usually thinking about that, this is a good time when they're not quite as busy. So if you want Squeegee Squad to come out, they can clean your windows, the inside, the out, the screens, which no one ever thinks to clean. So you can, because sometimes, the windows might be, the glass might be clean, but then it turns out the screens are all kind of full of cobwebs and whatever it is that gunk that builds up in there. So the Squeegee Squad can take care of that as well. They do some interior painting as well in the winter, just during the winter months, December through like probably February or March. So if you need a room or two touched up, there's no better place to call than the Squeegee Squad, because as a listener to the show, you get 15% off. You get estimate for it. So go to our support page at thefinalfoursontheschedule.com/support. There you can find a way to get hold of Troy and his team and get an estimate on cleaning your glass. All right. So for Michigan State, cleaning the glass was once again, now Jackson Kohler's 8 for 8 as I win and it's 4-4 now. So he had another good game. A couple of his offensive rebounds are off his misses. So I guess you could say he was kind of like he wasn't as
It was
uh,
Moses Malone.
a little bit. Yeah, he wasn't quite
He
thrown off the
was
backboard himself, but it was
for for those who are too young. That was something Moses Malone, who won several NBA rebounding titles in the late '70s and early '80s, was renowned for. It was in a half joking way that he's intentionally missing shots around the rim so he can pad his rebounding stats.
my son was joking about because he's down in Indianapolis, but he's like, yeah, kind of like Angel Reese. I don't know if you watch her. She'll go like
Yeah,
5 for 15,
she
five
has that
fifteen.
reputation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's shooting like 30%, but she's shooting from 4 feet away, and so she
yeah,
because she just gets all her off rebounds to get double doubles all the time. So anyway, so we tie up there 4-4. I think another solid rebounding performance from Michigan State. Not overwhelming, but it's solid. Again, now we're starting to get picky. Like you said, expectations have changed. Last year we'd have been thrilled with this result, where hold team under 25% on the defensive end, and then you're over 35% from the offensive end. We would have been doing
yeah.
cartwheels. Now we're like, okay.
Yeah, and what I was happy to see, I mean, I'll save it for when we
Yeah,
go
we'll
over the
go
case.
into sure a little bit. We get to the keys to the game. So, and then we are going to change this. We've got to change the contest. So I think we had a pretty good suggestion, don't you think? We'll talk about that the next show as far as how we want to do the rebounding, because right now it is just the Jackson Kohler or bust. I mean, it's just Jackson Kohler versus the field right now. I think we can maybe change it up a little bit. It's going to be a little bit more paperwork, but I think we can figure it out. So,
Well,
uh,
yeah, okay, fair enough.
yeah. So let's talk about the 5 keys to the game brought to you by Nudge Printing. It might be a little late if you want anything by Christmas, but if you need something by New Year's, Nudge Printing can do it. You can head on over to Nudge Printing at nudgeprinting.com. They have a wide selection of stuff. I'm wearing a sweatshirt right now. They have lots of these hoodies that are super comfortable. They're very breathable. They look great, sustain the washes well. And so you want to go over there. You get 20% off as a listener to the show if you just type in Final Four, just as one word at the checkout for the coupon code. And they have a huge selection of not only clothing just for Michigan State, but also other schools too. So you can check out their wide selection if you want vintage stuff, if you want current stuff. They've got all the different logos. They have really cool hats right now. And I almost pulled the trigger and got one for my son, but he's got so many hats. We were actually at the game. So I got to ask you this. So do you like those big hats? Those giant hats? Have you seen those guys? There's like
Are
foam on the inside, and they got the
you talking about, like, they showed one on the
yeah, like the
broadcast today,
big
like the
hats or
giant?
something. Like
No, I don't.
I turned my son and he's like, "Oh yeah, those are pretty cool." I'm like, "Oh, I wouldn't have guessed that he would like those hats." But I was joking that he needs to get one for
Yeah,
when he goes golfing. I don't know if they actually make them
yeah,
with like Titleist or something. That
uh-huh.
they fly off and anyway, because there were a couple of guys who had those hats, which they must have shown on the broadcast too.
Yeah.
They do not have those at Nudge. They have like the really cool like regular hats. Just so you know,
That's
just to be
another
clear.
point. That's another point in Nudge's favor.
That's all made in Portland, Michigan. So it's a home-based product. It's a small business, a great Spartans to support here. So check them out, nudgeprinting.com. They support our keys to the game. And the first key to the game was the pace. And this is one that Michigan State, is definitely a fast-paced game. Let's see. I've got the numbers as far as fast break points is 27-17 edge for Michigan State,
Yeah.
which you'd expect, but it's a team that plays fast. And so you never know how it's going to turn out entirely. The second chance points, strangely, about the same. That doesn't really have to do with the fast break. So, but a lot of Michigan State's fast break points too are really loud, like we mentioned with Cone, and they were momentum shifting. And I felt like the ones
Yeah.
of Florida Atlantic were not quite as important, if that makes sense.
There was another great one that I wanted to call out because it was a total effort play from beginning to end. It was in the second half. Jaden Akins made a defensive play,
Oh yes,
deflected it forward,
to
chased it
himself.
down, right, chased it down, and then converted in what sure looked like a foul to
How is that
me.
not a foul?
Yeah,
Is it because it went in? I don't know.
there were a few that were missed. Well, sometimes, unfortunately, that's exactly right. That's the evaluation,
Right.
that you'll get the call after the fact if you miss it, and it's, yeah, poor officiating. But yeah, that was a really impressive play. You mentioned Cohen Carr was just a rim destroyer in transition in this one. And they were important. I thought Michigan State's break in this game provided the fuel that they needed to, and I know it may have seemed like I was somewhat dismissive of your sleepy description, and I really didn't mean to be, because I don't think that's entirely wrong. I just it's sometimes that has an implication that I think is a little strong for what this was. But the reality is that, as I think you pointed out, that's not unheard of at this time of year. This game right
Yeah.
before the holidays, guys are, and it's especially, this is another thing we don't really talk about very much. This is not the kind of team that Tom Izzo has had traditionally at Michigan State. By that, I mean, you've got guys from all different parts of the country.
Yeah, that's what
in the old days,
nearby.
in the old days, in Aikens.
Oh,
in
yeah,
the
right,
old
Jaden,
in the old days, everybody could drive.
Right.
Everybody could get home with a car ride. It's not that way. I mean, Jackson Kohler is from Utah.
Yeah.
Cohen
Georgia.
Carr's from the South. Yeah. Frankie Fiddler's from Omaha. Simone Zapala is from, his parents are in town, as I understand it, but he's from Poland.
Right.
On and on we go. Now, there's some of these guys, Book and Fears. Trey Holloman's maybe a little bit far away, Minnesota, but you get my point.
Yeah.
That
they got travel plans.
It's even easier to understand it with this group, just because of the geographic variability in terms of
and you're not seeing
diversity.
You're not seeing family, very often between games, right? As frequently.
So it would be easier to understand it from this team in a game like this. But I think that MSU's transition play and those loud transition plays were a big part of giving them the energy they needed to ride this one out and get what was in the end a relatively comfortable victory. That was a big part of it. And as we said in the preview, you're playing another team that wants to play fast also. Well, the standard at Michigan State is you look at a game like that and you say, all right, bring it. And you expect to win that. You expect to be better than they are. And Michigan State was.
Yeah.
So job done.
Absolutely. Second key to the game was the glass, and this is one where we had a team that was not a good defensive rebounding team in Florida Atlantic or a good offensive rebounding team. And Michigan State, I hesitate to say dominated, but they definitely out rebounded them pretty easily. 14 offensive rebounds to 10. The total rebounds of 48 to 36. They held Florida Atlantic to 24.3% offensive rebounding rate. And I think Michigan State was around 37.5% or so.
Yeah, 14 of 38. Yeah.
Yeah, so pretty good. I mean, those are both very solid numbers. I wouldn't say either of them are like elite, but they're like really good. And so you'd expect that in this game, and they pulled it off. The one thing I mentioned, the second chance points, not great for Michigan State, only 13 second chance points off those rebounds, and 14 for Florida Atlantic.
What did we say about finishing twos?
Yeah,
a lot of those missed opportunities were off offensive rebounds.
Yep.
Where they might have 3 shots at the rim and they couldn't get one to drop. So that was disappointing. But yeah, in general, Michigan State did the things that you want to see. Here's the thing I thought stood out in this game that was really nice to see. We talk about the inevitability of Jackson Kohler these days, right? Okay, well, that's true. But if you look beyond that, look, Jaden Akins, 5 rebounds. Cohen Carr, 8.
Yeah.
Jace Richardson, 6. That's really good rebounding from your wings. And this is something Izzo talks about. I heard him talk about it the other day, where he was talking about wings leaking out a little too quickly.
Yep.
And that's always been a challenge at MSU because of the way they want to play, is how do you balance that responsibility to make sure you get the defensive rebound with, we also want to beat the other team to the rim. That could be a tough trick to turn. And I've been banging on this drum for years that Michigan State will become what we expect a Michigan State team to be again in terms of rebounding when the perimeter group gets it together, because that's been a weakness. Well, I think a game like today, and really we've been seeing it done well all year, but today especially with those numbers I mentioned, 3 guys in that group combining for 19 rebounds in Carr and Richardson and Akins. That's the kind of stuff that you want to see.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
that's what's going to say, because MSU got it from their bigs too. Kohler had 12s, Apala had 7.
Yeah,
Book had 4, and Carson didn't have any. But the bigs did what they do essentially. But
yeah.
what's going to separate you, what's going to enable you to be really good, is when other guys are getting into the act. And I felt like Michigan State really got that today. Cohen Carr, I'm not sure if that's a career high in rebounding. It might be 8 in a game. I don't believe he's ever hit double digits, but that's what Cohen Carr can be.
Oh
I
yeah, for
mean,
sure.
you saw that, 3 offensive rebounds. That's what Cohen Carr can be. It's just
Yeah.
a matter of him finding a way to consistently get to that level. Nothing Jace Richardson does anymore surprises me. But when you say a guy who's 6'3" goes out and gets 6 rebounds or only 1 offensive, but you know, that kid can do anything. That's not going to surprise me.
The fact that
Um,
they've had one offensive is impressive. Well, and I think to your point too, with you have the Akins and Richardson and Carr, even if you didn't include Carr and said, well, he's playing 4 more at that time,
right.
you still have, Hallman had 3, Fierce had a rebound. When the difference between having a 25% defensive rebounding rate versus a 34% is that right there, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
that is the difference. When
Absolutely.
you're cleaning up the stuff that maybe the big guys can't because it goes out a little bit, bounces out at the lane or something. And that's just what wasn't happening the last few years. And now you've got people with a nose for the ball scooping up and making sure they get going. And it doesn't slow down the break either, which we saw. In fact, that gets the break going oftentimes, even though you're not sprinting down the court right
Yeah.
away. And I
I
think they learned that.
and I think there was a sign of some improvement in that area from the Oakland game, where especially in the first
Yeah.
half of that game, they were leaky, you
Yeah.
know. But it was good. It was good to see.
All right. So the third key of the game was perimeter. And this is like you said, it feels like the most fraudulent 38% from 3 for the year. But I get 8 for 21 is still 8 for 21. The usual
They all
guys, you
count.
didn't. Yeah, I mean Kohler missed his badly. Akins hit his last one to go 1 for 1. But I think we can focus on the Carr and the Fears. The normal one, he's just coming off the bench, so that's not really that big a deal. But Jeremy's looked good. His shot looks good. He's just not someone
Yeah.
who's looking to shoot. But to your point earlier, as long as he makes a couple of these from time to time, you can't sag all the way off him, and you never just see people do that. And that just, I like the fact that he did that. I think he did over the 7-footer. Like I think they got the switch out there, or maybe it was Miller was on him, and he just like
Well, he's
okay,
6. He's 6'11", close
yeah.
enough.
But I mean, yeah, right. But it was one of the I think it was Miller. Anyway, he's just decided to shoot, and it reminds me a lot of like I'm not saying he's like Cassius, but you definitely see that part of his game is going to be there. And Carr hitting the 3, it's like I turn to what my wife's like, wow, it'd be great if he keeps doing that. I'm thinking, I said to her, well, I hope he does it not quite so much because he starts knocking that down at any sort of rate, which I don't think will happen this year. But I mean, I guess you never know. But then he's not going to be here next year because
No, that's for
with
sure.
that kind of athletic profile, and if he starts hitting threes at like 33
That's
per 4%, he's not going to be around.
that's lottery pick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, for sure.
Yeah, with both of those guys, we'll start with Jeremy. I believe Jeremy Fears will be a good shooter, and I haven't looked to see. I guess I can look it up right now. What Jeremy is actually shooting from 3 on the year. Here we go. So it doesn't count today's game, but it's easy enough to
Because it's Michigan State stat line. They never keep.
No, this is actually, yeah. Um, so he's shooting, sorry. Well, no, that I believe, if I've got this right, that makes him 50% on the year. He's 3 for 6, which
Yep,
is
I see that
what
too,
I
yeah.
thought. Which
Yeah.
is what I thought. So look, the volume, that means he's averaging half an attempt per game. So he's not taking a lot, right?
Yeah,
But
right.
the shot looks good.
Yes.
This is not, Tum Tum Nairn,
No,
where
or even Mateen
okay,
Cleaves.
right, absolutely. I would agree with that. I think that his stroke looks better than Mateen's did, and I saw
Yeah.
him do this in high school, and I didn't. It's always been the knock on him, but I never felt like his shot looked particularly bad. Um, I think it's going to be more and more a weapon for him as time goes on. I don't expect that the volume is going to go up tremendously from here, but you know what? When the guy's 50%, you probably ought to at least respect him.
Right.
You're not going to load up on him, but you probably don't want, and that's the thing with a guy like that. If teams are just going to let him take an open three, I'm feeling pretty confident that he can hit those if they're going to give him space. So I mentioned, that was just one element. It wasn't that far from the most important, but I just thought he was really good today.
Yeah.
I mean, just all the way around, and he's been good, and he continues to be good, and he continues just his judgment, and that was an example of it, right? Like there was a shot opportunity there. If he passes it up, that can end up being a negative because you gum up the works offensively, and frequently when you see that kind of decision being made where there's a good shot opportunity and it gets passed up, you end up with a much worse one or a turnover. It just happens to find you. It's kind of the basketball gods punishing you for not playing the way you should. And he plays the way he should pretty much all the. I mean, it's not that he never makes mistakes. He's not Chase Richardson, but I will take Jeremy Fears's basketball IQ and his judgment every day of the week. So that's him. Cohen Carr, that looked good.
I mean, his free throws have looked a ton better. He's hit 6 in a row now. So he's well over 50%, I guess, for the season now. Well, not well over, but he's over 50%.
He's well over now, I'm sure, because he doesn't shoot a ton of them. So
that's true.
I'm guessing he might even be knocking on the door of 60.
He's 56%, so he's 19 for 20 for 34. So
okay, but that release looked nice, and I think it was Jaden made that decision. The guard penetrated, sucked the defense in, and with no hesitation kicked the ball to him. And so what I say by it looked good, I don't even just mean the form on the release, obviously not just the result, but I even mean that element of it. Like the timing was there. That was a classic circumstance of drive and kick. The guard drives, penetrates, draws the defense in, kicks the ball to an open shooter, and then the shooter goes up for the open shot without any hesitation. So all of it, the timing of it, the processing speed, the decision, and then obviously the release and the end result all looked exactly the way you want them to look. So that's a great thing. Now, I'm with you. If we see a bunch
I would
of those,
look, if he starts making that and they go to win the national championship, I'm okay with him leaving.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But I really liked the way that whole process of that shot felt. All of it, not just the fact that he hit it.
Right. And the play right before, like I said, he got the block.
That was play. Right. That was,
and then came down. And that's, I think, why he hit that, because I think he was just like, I think they gave just extra confidence, right?
That was an incredible, and we've been seeing that pretty much at least one time a game lately, going back to the Minnesota game,
right?
Where he makes a big time defensive play frequently on a weak side block, as that one was. Well, one of their big kids, I can't remember who it was. If it was Miller or Carroll.
I think it was Miller. I think he just erased him off the.
Yeah, and Cohen just took it away. As you said, the ball stays in play. I think it was Jeremy got it on the sideline, and then you saw Cohen. If you watch that, you see him sprinting down the floor. So not that it was an immediate bang bang the way some of these others have been, but he gets himself into position, and then he finds himself in the corner, drive and kick. Defense is drawn to the penetrator. Ball gets kicked to him. He's rewarded. So yeah, really, really good stuff from him. And those energy plays happening from one end to the other are another way in which I think he's providing that kind of momentum for this team.
Yeah. And I think, so Trey Hallman 2 for 4 from three as well, which is encouraging to see him. Hopefully he
Yeah.
continues that pace. And you
I
both
didn't
are
have
just,
I didn't well, and let's also one of those was, and I think it got overshadowed a bit by what the things Colin Carr did, but he had one where he just completely undressed the defender. The defender fell, and then go
he
at a
flew like 10 feet. It
crossover.
looked like he got
Yeah,
pushed by.
and then Trey just very calmly stepped back behind the line and drained it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was okay with his 3-point shot selection. As I said, his 2-point shot selection, I had a little bit of a problem with, but on one occasion for sure. But
Yeah.
look, as a team, and I haven't seen what they're starting to get. I'm guessing this one got them up right at like 28%, maybe a
Yeah. I'll
shade
have to check
over.
Torvik and see where they are now, but
Yeah.
we'll see what
So
they
they're
took it added.
climbing. They're climbing, and
It was a big hole they were climbing out of, just to
but
be
it
clear.
right. But this is four straight. This is four straight
Yeah.
coming out of Maui. I'm sorry. Wait, 5 straight, right? No, 4 straight.
4 straight. Yeah. North
four,
Carolina, the Big
4
Ten
straight
games,
coming out of
Oakland, and yeah.
4 straight coming out of Maui, where they are at 35% plus. Because I'm not, you'll hear people say, well, over the last 4 games, they're shooting 42%. I'm not interested in that number as much right now, because they had that huge game against Minnesota where they were 11 for 22, which is going to, could offset like a 30% night. What I'm interested
28.7%.
So knocking on the door at 29.
Yeah.
So
329th in the country now, from 362nd, I think they were for a while.
So, but what I think is really important here is consistency. And if this team offensively is consistently seeing 35% plus 3-point shooting, this becomes a very difficult offense to deal with because of all the other ways they score. So if that's there to add to everything else, hey, you're going to have a long day at the office trying to stop Michigan State. And we see it. They do that. They go 8 for 21 from 3 in this game. They end up with 86 points.
Yeah, it's not like
because of everything else they do.
Yes,
right. But because of everything else they do, that just gets added to it. And look out.
I know. Well, we'll talk about 2-point shots. That was a fourth key to the game. It's one that, again, they just were unable to hit bunnies, so
very disappointing.
So that was not good.
And it wasn't just the bigs. It was Jeremy Fears, I think, was he 0 for 3?
Might have been. I'm not sure.
From 2. I'm sorry. He was 3 for 8.
3 for 8.
3 for 8 from 2. Holloman was 0 for 1. Jaden was okay, actually.
Jaden was pretty good, I thought. He's better
was 5 for 9
than 3.
Jackson Kohler 2 for 8.
Richardson was 1 for 4.
Yeah, Richardson was very unusual. Right. Yeah. Richardson 1 for 4. Just not what we've come to expect from this team. Kohler's the one that stands out, but I guess my point is there were other crimes committed besides his. So that's something that, again, is disappointing. You would hope and expect to see better. It needs to be better. And that'll be something hopefully we see against Western.
Yeah. And the fifth and final key to the game was the free throw line. Didn't get there as much as usual, only 20 free throws, but hit 16 of them for to lower their season average down to it's only 80% from. I think they're averaging 81.5 before this coming in. So they got a lot of work done there, and I don't know. I mean, that was definitely key. Florida Atlantic came in shooting 71%, and they shot really well from line. They shot almost 80%, 11 for 14. They just didn't get there quite as much. And so anyway, it was not an advantage for Florida Atlantic. It was an advantage for Michigan State. And certainly just the free fouling in general was an advantage for Michigan State because it really limited the depth problems, especially in that first half. And I got set that spread between the two teams that Florida Atlantic could never overcome in the second half.
Yeah, it was definitely a first half story. MSU didn't, I think maybe 4 or 6 free throw attempts in the second half.
That sounds right.
Well, let me look. I've got it.
I guess we got the
Yeah,
splits here.
yeah, they were 4 for 6 in the second half, 12 for 14 in the first.
Yeah.
So it slowed down considerably after the break. Maybe not coincidentally when Michigan State started hitting a few more threes. But not bad. A little bit shy of what you'd like to see in attempts, but certainly not a disaster. You get to the line for 20 free throws. It's hard to get too upset about that. And obviously the conversion rate continues to be outstanding. 80%, which is basically what they've shot on the year. So good stuff there. And that's all when you add it up. You do that job at the line, you get 27 points in transition, and you go 8 for 21 from three. It offsets kind of a subpar game from two, right?
Yeah.
So
you cruise in over 80 points easily.
you still end up where you want to be overall,
Yeah.
despite one of your strengths not being particularly strong today.
And Frankie Fiddler, 6 of 6 from line.
I'm
So
glad
he
you
was
brought him
right.
up.
So he was
Yeah.
not. He kind of can't. He kind of got. It felt more comfortable. It looked like in the
Yes.
offense and attacking the basket. So he not only got some foul trouble on. I know at least one of those was against Miller to force him. I think that was on his third on Miller to force him out of in the first half. But then that guy is 50 for 55 this year. So he's 91% from the
Yeah.
line. He doesn't even hit the rim. He's really impressive. So it's great that when he gets there, he's able to score. It's just a matter of just getting the rest of his game coming around. And I think
Yeah.
I mean, you see it at times. I wish they, and I know you've mentioned many times before, I'd like to see him run 2 or 3 pin downs in a row. I feel like that would be a great way to kind of get him going, like at
Yep.
the free throw line. It seems like a natural thing for them to do for him.
Yeah, it was good to see him for the first time in a few games be very aggressive in
Yeah.
looking to create those opportunities for himself. Because that is an element that this team can use. The one thing about Frankie is that, and I think he was 0 for 2 today from three. The 3-point shot just has not come around yet.
Yeah.
But man, everything else I thought was really good today. He will, a couple times a game at least, you will see him attack a rebound, and sometimes he doesn't even get it. Sometimes it's a deflection that he causes that ends up in somebody else's hands. But I really like what he does there. I think he's gotten better defensively. And, when he can be this aggressive in looking to create opportunities for himself, get himself to the line, and as you say, he's going to convert when he gets there. That I can live with the 3-point shooting. He's still helping you. You'd like to see that come around, but you can live with it when he does these other things. And I still think he's been a productive player. The thing is too that Michigan State, I think it's becoming clearer that there probably isn't, unless things were to change really dramatically, there probably isn't quite as large a role for him as we'd envisioned. At the start of the year, I figured he'd be a mid-20s guy in terms of minutes played. And with Jace Richardson's emergence, and I think with Cohen Carr doing, because that's mostly happening at the 3, I think that's turning Frankie into a guy, and admittedly, Frankie not hitting deep shots, all that has factored in, and you're maybe not going to see him playing the 25 minutes a night that I know I had anticipated at the start of the year. I think most people did, but that's okay. In the minutes he's giving them productive play. And certainly on a day like today, it was really nice to see.
Yeah, I think it's not like you're replacing with chopped liver, right? You're getting someone who's producing at an even better rate than him. So I'm comfortable with that.
Oh, it's happening for a good reason. Yes.
Yeah, and I think it's not like Michigan State's left with a bunch of bad choices, and so that he's not on the floor. So that's what's encouraging about it all.
When he's as he was today, I think he was the 10th guy in the rotation. He was the 10th guy.
He was last off the bench. Yeah.
Yeah. Man, you got a good team. Right. If that's, to put it simply, if that's what's happening, if that guy is your 10th guy, you're pretty good.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about two things. One is this rotation's 10. I have a hard time envisioning that it's going to get tightened up a whole lot more. I mean, it might be.
No, no, I
It
don't think
seems
so.
like everybody's got kind of role, and any one night, one person might have bring something a little different that they need, and so I tend to think you're going to see everybody. I I think if anybody's going to get left out in any game, not playing many minutes, it'd be Cooper. But then even then, it's it depends what your position is.
Well,
What your
I would.
situation is at the five. If you need him to guard some big players,
That's
he's
it.
like right. And even Frankie, there's going to be nights where he's going to start. He's going to start making some stuff. So anyway, the question was really, Michigan State has, for the first time that I can remember, very routinely had these like line changes where you basically bring a whole second crew in,
Yeah.
you bring substituting four at a time. It seems to be working. Like you ordinarily you wouldn't normally do that, I don't think, but it seems to be the right thing because I don't know. I mean, I guess you keep doing it as long as it seems to be working all right.
Well, this is where this subject, um, there's a really easy way to be able to tell if somebody doesn't really understand what they're talking about. And I say this about Michigan State social media, and I saw it today, and I see it pretty much every game where you will see people harp on certain playing combinations, and especially at this time of the year,
Yeah.
and certain guys playing the amount of minutes that they do. Um, it's a tell. And and so I'll give you an example of something that I saw today. And in fairness, it was something that I didn't like, but I understand, I think, why. There was a segment in the second half where Michigan State was kind of teetering, and it looked like it was verging on maybe Florida Atlantic having a chance to get it to single digits and get back in the game. MSU played a lineup with Jace Richardson at the point, and I believe it was, I want to make sure I get this right. It was Frankie Fiddler and Cohen Carr on the wings. And then I think it was Book and Coop, might have for some of it been Book and Kohler or Book and Zapala, but you get my
Mm-hmm.
point.
Yeah.
That was the lineup. So it was only one real guard because although Frankie and Cohen are wings, they're not guards the way that we
Yeah.
think of the other guys, right?
Right.
And it was frustrating to watch because that lineup didn't get much done. They certainly didn't score much. And it felt like, all right, where's it going to come from? Because yeah, Jace can make plays, but he's one guy and he's one
Right.
threat, you know,
Yeah.
and it didn't work. But I think there are going to be times during the course of Big Ten play where Michigan State may face a team that's going big against them. And
Mm-hmm.
Tom Izzo wants to find out what he's got. He wants to find out whether a combination, and you can safely assume he's played those guys together in practice. They've seen it. It's not the first time they've all been on a court together, but it's the first time that group has been on a court together when the lights are on. And that
Right.
is a different thing. And as a coach, you need to have, ideally, before stuff really gets serious, you want to have a sense of what cards you might have available to you to play. And
Mm-hmm.
the only way you're ever going to find out is by trying it, right?
Yeah.
Same holds true with other combinations. That one was one that particularly stands out in my mind because it was one that I didn't love, but that's me. I'm not Tom Izzo. And I think I understand why Izzo was doing it. It wasn't anything to do with this game in particular. It's him finding out, all right, is this a combination that if I had a need, if I perceived a reason to go to it, that I can do so? And I'm okay with that. I mean, everybody should be, because this is what, year 947 of seeing this stuff. It's what they do. It's what Tom Izzo does, what he's always done, what he's always going to do. You don't like it? Go find somebody else to pay attention to. I mean, really,
Yeah.
I just get so tired of the idiocy. Like you don't know what you don't know. And as I said it, I tweeted it to one particularly egregious offender who I will not dignify by referencing because he's a fucking dolt. I said I tweeted at him that I would love to put you in a room with Tom Izzo for 10 minutes and make sure we got cameras to see it. Love it. And I would say that to everybody. If you have an instinct to be harping about a lineup combination on the floor for Michigan State, know what you don't know. And that's not to say that Tom Izzo was infallible, but what I am telling you is, like it or not, there is a reason. And the guy who knows a hell of a lot more than you do perceives a reason, even if it's got nothing to do with this game in front of you. There's a reason. And I'm very, very convinced that is why we saw that lineup that I mentioned. Had nothing to do with beating Florida Atlantic, had everything to do with him trying to figure out, is this something I can use?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah,
he's done that stuff as long as he's been here.
sure. And you don't know that. I mean, you can watch players practice from year to year, what combination works on the floor, what doesn't. So yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that.
You don't
So
you can't tell as much in practice. You can have an
no.
inkling in practice, but if you're seeing it in practice, and maybe he saw it in practice and it was actually productive and he wanted
Yeah.
to try it for a segment because it went on. It was like a full 4-minute segment. And I'm like everybody else watching it. I'm up in arms. But at least I want to give myself enough credit to say I'm smart enough to not make that public. I have plausible deniability.
So the other question I had then now, so we're 12 games into the season, so they're 10-2 with a game coming up against Western, and then they begin Big Ten play,
Yeah.
restart Big Ten play in Columbus, and then home against Washington. So this team where they are right now, I'll start by just saying they're further along and they're far more promising looking team than I had anticipated at this point. I mean, there's certainly things that I thought we'd see, and we've seen, I think, much more. I think the emergence of Richardson being what he is, and being a very, very productive, smart player, great both ends. I think Fears are kind of what I expected. And we see more out of Booker and certainly Kohler than I had expected. And even Akins, I was not a buyer that he was going to be the player we needed. And yet this is a guy, he had one game where he led in rebounds, but I mean, I'll let you go through all of them, but I'm just will say that for him, he has been the senior that you kind of hoped he would be. And where he's not, super flashy. He's not there scoring 20 points a game, but 10, 12, 13, 14 points. He's still leading scorer for the team, I think, and just on point average, but he just comes with it both ends every game. And that's I think the thing you needed most for him, which I didn't know he'd had. I wasn't sure that he was going to be that guy, and he seems to be that guy.
Yeah, he's today was a prime example of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
He didn't go crazy. He didn't have one of those 20-point plus games, but he found moments where there were opportunities for him to do damage, and he did them. And then he combined those with some effort plays like that one I talked about earlier, which was a great play, start to finish, that ended up in a transition layup. But it was entirely a product of his defense and his work rate, his effort. He's playing very steady basketball right now. And I think I said it a couple games ago. He had a game where he only had 9 points. Maybe it was Nebraska. I don't know. But sometime recently where he only had 9 points. But I thought, he's playing really well. He's not forcing anything. He's taking what's there. And by the way, I do think he has come a long way in terms of his ability to get things done with the ball in his hands, which was a thing that everybody had talked about and that didn't look good. Didn't even look great early this year. But I think he's found a rhythm and a confidence now. And I'm with you. He is giving them the kind of leadership and savvy play from a veteran who's picking his spots, isn't forcing anything, is generally making the right decisions. That's exactly what you wanted. And yeah, you didn't know for sure if you were going to get it. I would say for the most part, this team has had play to the upside of what you would expect. So somebody like Zapala, we did not have super high expectations for. He's clearly been better than anybody expected. I think Jackson Kohler clearly has been better.
Yep.
I think Cohen Carr has been at least somewhat better than you'd
No pun.
expect.
He's leapt to our
Yeah.
expectations here.
Yep. Jaden, we just talked about. Jace Richardson. I expected something of him, but he has been better than I thought he would be.
Yeah.
That's how good he's been. Jeremy Fears, I think, has at least been as good as I thought he would be, maybe a little bit better. Now there are a few guys, Xavier Booker, kind of up and down. You maybe hoped for more, but I still feel pretty good about where he is. Trey
Yep.
Holloman is a guy we don't talk about a ton. I think he's got another gear to get to because I think his decision making has not been as good this year as it was a year ago. But I know that that's there. And when that does happen, I think his play will rise another level. Carson Cooper, I know the Twitter dipshit fan base has it out for him, and they're morons.
Someone's got to be the whipping boy.
Right. Carson Cooper is going to have a role to play on this team that's important. Bet on it. Record me, quote it back at me if he's not, I'll live with it. Carson Cooper is going to play a very important role for this team at some stage of Big Ten. And I don't mean one game, I mean multiple games in Big Ten play, because the kind of size you're going to see from certain teams, you need those physical matchups. You just do. And so overall, yeah, I think it's hard to feel that this team is not somewhere near the upper end of what you reasonably could have expected. I mean, I picked them fifth, right?
Yes, you did.
Right now, as I look at the Big Ten, and I don't think there's huge separation. I think there are a lot of good teams, maybe not a great team, but who's played better? I think I would have said before this afternoon, UCLA was one team that you might have been able to, because they have a road win at Oregon, which is probably the best win in the league, even though some might say it was other games. Winning a road game against a good team, that's a big deal. But UCLA lost on a neutral site to North Carolina, coughed up a big lead today. So, I still think UCLA is going to be in that title mix. I do. But, who's better? There's nobody in the Big Ten who's better definitively than Michigan State. I'm telling you that right now. There's not a lot of separation there. I'm not saying they're any kind of favorite, but there's nobody who's had, in my opinion, there's nobody who's had put together a better total body of work to this stage than Michigan State. And there's nobody that is playing definitively better than Michigan State right now. There just isn't. So does that mean they're a little ahead of where I thought they'd be? Yeah, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look at the rebounding. That's improved. The free throw attempt. I mean, we thought that'd be better mainly because of Fiddler, but it's not just because of Fiddler, right? It's not like he's getting to the line 12 times a game. I mean, this is a different focus in the team, and they play faster. And we looked at all the offensive stats. I mean, they're 30-something offensive, and that's considering offensive rating, even though they're, 29% from three for the season still. So there's every reason to think that they're a whole lot better. And I kind of like the fact that we sort of been just kind of creeping up the board, and it hasn't come all at once as far as accolades. They're kind of focusing on other Big Ten teams right now.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of nice.
Yeah. And the rest of the Big Ten, by and large, has not surprised me. Yeah. You could see an individual team here or there, but I mean, generally speaking, it's been pretty much what I expected. It's a league with a lot of good teams, probably not a great one. Mm-hmm. And maybe a great one emerges, and maybe that great one ends up being Michigan State. That's possible. Could be somebody else. But I like where MSU is sitting right now. I feel really good about this team. Yeah. And again, because we say it's not like, well, it can't get better than this. It's like, no, there are things that can be better. So yeah, feels good.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm looking forward to the next quarter or next third of the season as we get through deep into Big Ten play. All right, so I think we'll leave it there. Again, quick shout out to Bruce. Sorry I got your name wrong before. So he sits in front of me, my seats. So very nice little chat with him before the game. Also, just check out our sponsors at the Final Fours on the schedule.com/support. Check out the three main sponsors of the show, ways for you to support the show if you want. We really appreciate that. You can either do it on a recurring basis or one time via Venmo or PayPal. Also, there's some other deals there as well if you want to get a hold of Coach Garland's book or other things. You can find all those links on that page as well. So peruse it. Cost you nothing. Make sure you give us 5-star written review on your podcast player and continue to recommend to your friends. Check us out on YouTube as well if you want to watch my mug as we talk about all this stuff. So until next time, when we talk about Western Michigan, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go Green.